The phone call from her mother came at exactly the worst possible time, right when Natalie Anderson was 3 hours deep into her graduate thesis on medieval trade routes, and running on nothing but black coffee and spite. "Darling, your father and I are so thrilled you're finally bringing someone to the family dinner next week." Her mother chirped through the speaker. "We were beginning to worry you'd be alone forever." Natalie's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "Don't be coy, sweetheart. Your cousin mentioned you've been seeing someone seriously. A professional man," she said. "We're all dying to meet him." That lying, meddling Natalie bit back a curse. Her cousin Jessica had been making up stories again, probably to deflect attention from her own recent divorce. And now Natalie's entire family expected her to show up to their annual dinner with a boyfriend who didn't exist. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No need to be nervous. We'll keep it casual. Just dinner at the estate. Your father's already planning to break out the good wine. See you Saturday at 7 sharp." The line went dead before Natalie could protest further. She stared at her phone, then at the calendar on her wall. Saturday, 5 days away. 5 days to either come clean about being pathologically single or somehow produce a convincing fake boyfriend willing to endure an evening with her overbearing family at their sprawling countryside estate. The estate. Of course it had to be at the estate, where her father could corner her date in the study for an interrogation, where her mother could make pointed comments about grandchildren, where Jessica could smirk in triumph at yet another family gathering dominated by her drama. Natalie dropped her head into her hands. This was a disaster. 3 days later, she was still no closer to a solution. She'd considered hiring an actor, but every service she found online looked desperately sketchy. She'd thought about bribing her friend Marcus, but he'd just started dating someone, and it felt wrong to drag him into her family dysfunction. Which was how she found herself at midnight in the university's restricted archives, stress researching her thesis and trying not to think about the impending doom of Saturday's dinner, when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. The archives were supposed to be empty. Locked, even. Natalie had only gotten in because Professor Chen had given her a key for her research. She froze, listening to the measured footfall growing closer. The door opened soundlessly, and a man stepped through. Except he wasn't quite a man. Natalie realized with a jolt that sent ice down her spine. He was too pale, his skin like marble in the dim light. His hair fell in waves of pure white around a face that could have been carved by a Renaissance master, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her yearly stipend, and he moved with the fluid grace of something apex. When his eyes met hers, they were the color of fresh blood. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice like silk over steel. Natalie's brain screamed at her to run, but her stubborn nature won out. "I have permission. Professor Chen gave me access for my research." Something flickered across his perfect face, amusement, perhaps. "I wasn't speaking of the archives." He moved closer, and Natalie saw the ancient intelligence in those crimson eyes, saw the slight elongation of his canines when he spoke, saw the way he didn't quite seem to breathe. "You're a vampire," she whispered. How astute. He tilted his head, studying her with unnerving intensity. "And you are remarkably calm for a human who just made such a discovery." "I'm internally screaming," Natalie admitted. "But I'm also really tired and stressed, and honestly, this might as well happen." That earned her an actual smile, brief but genuine. "A pragmatist, how refreshing." He extended one pale hand. "Alaric Draconis. I am the vampire king of the Eastern Territories, and I own this university." Natalie blinked. "You own the university, among other things." "I have always believed in supporting education." His hand remained extended, waiting. She shook it, feeling the coolness of his skin, the inhuman strength carefully leashed. "Natalie Anderson, graduate student. I'm researching medieval trade routes, a worthy pursuit." He released her hand and moved to the shelves, running pale fingers along ancient spines with clear familiarity. "I traveled some of those routes myself once, before the modern world made everything so terribly efficient." "How old are you?" Rude question. But his eyes gleamed with approval at her boldness. "Old enough to remember when these texts were new." "What specifically are you researching?" Against all reason, Natalie found herself explaining her thesis, the intersection of vampire legends and actual trade disruptions in 14th century Europe. She'd always assumed the vampire stories were just stories, metaphors for plague and war. "Some were metaphors," Alaric said softly. "Some were not. There was a territorial war that decade. Many humans died in the crossfire. We have tried to be more careful since then. We, vampires, my kind." He pulled a book from the shelf, one she'd been searching for unsuccessfully for months. "This contains eyewitness accounts from that period, written by one of my former advisors." He was meticulous in his documentation. Natalie took the book with shaking hands, realizing she was holding primary source material that could make her entire thesis. Why are you helping me? Alaric was quiet for a long moment. Because you didn't scream, didn't run. You saw what I am and you spoke to me like a person. His expression turned distant. That is rarer than you might think. Something in his voice made her chest ache. She recognized loneliness when she heard it, even wrapped in regal composure and centuries of pride. Thank you, she said softly. For the book. For not, eating me. He laughed, actual laughter, rich and unexpected. I haven't eaten anyone in 300 years, Miss Anderson. We have much more civilized arrangements now. His expression turned calculating. Though I confess your blood does smell remarkably appealing. There's a rare quality to it. If you ever wish to donate to the blood banks we sponsor, I would compensate you handsomely. I'll keep that in mind. Natalie clutched the book to her chest. I should probably go. Let you get back to whatever vampire kings do at midnight in university archives. I was reviewing acquisition requests, actually. Desperately boring. Alaric moved toward the door, then paused. You're welcome to return, if you need more sources. I'm here most nights. It was an invitation. Natalie knew she should refuse, should run far away from the beautiful monster who could kill her with one hand. Instead, she said, Tomorrow night? I have questions about the Carpathian routes. His smile was devastating. Tomorrow night, then. Natalie returned the next evening with a list of questions and a thermos of coffee she desperately needed. Alaric was already there, surrounded by stacks of ancient manuscripts, looking like he'd stepped out of a Gothic painting. They talked until dawn. He answered her questions with the precision of someone who'd lived through the history she studied, offering details no book could provide. In return, he seemed genuinely interested in her perspective, in how modern scholars interpreted events he'd witnessed. You see patterns we never noticed, he said, as the sky began to lighten outside the covered windows. We were too close to the events, too embroiled in our own politics and survival. That's what historians do, Natalie said. Find meaning in hindsight, a luxury of mortality perhaps. When you have eternity, everything seems less meaningful. She looked at him sharply. That sounds lonely. It is, he said it simply, without self-pity. A fact stated plainly. I have ruled for 8 centuries, Miss Anderson. I have advisors, subjects, allies. But true companionship? That has been elusive. Why? Because I'm a monster. Because humans fear me and other vampires want things from me. Because I learned long ago that showing vulnerability is dangerous. He met her eyes. And because I swore I would never pretend to be something I'm not. Not for anyone. There was a story there, Natalie sensed. A painful one. But before she could ask, Alaric rose smoothly. Dawn approaches. I must return to my residence before the sun rises fully. Will you be here tomorrow? Yes, Natalie said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. The next 3 nights followed the same pattern. Natalie would arrive at midnight, and she and Alaric would talk until dawn threatened. They discussed history and politics, art and philosophy. He told her stories of the world before electricity, before printing presses, before the modern age flattened everything into homogeneity. She told him about her research, her dreams of becoming a professor, her frustration with her family's constant pressure to settle down and be normal. They're having their annual dinner tomorrow night. She sighed on Thursday, the words spilling out before she could stop them. And my cousin told them I'm bringing a boyfriend, who doesn't exist. So I either have to humiliate myself by showing up alone, or humiliate myself by bringing a stranger and pretending he's my serious boyfriend. Alaric looked up from the manuscript he'd been examining. Why not simply tell them the truth? Because then it's a whole thing. My mother worrying I'll die alone, my father making concerned faces, Jessica smirking because her drama distraction worked perfectly. Natalie rubbed her temples. I know it sounds stupid, it sounds human, Alaric said quietly. Family obligation is a powerful force. Even we vampires aren't immune to it. I don't suppose you'd want to play my fake boyfriend for one dinner? Natalie laughed, but it came out hollow. Show up, look impressive, eat some food you probably can't digest, and endure my family's interrogation? She'd meant it as a joke. A stress-relieved quip. But when she looked up, Alaric's expression had gone completely cold. No, he said, his voice like winter. Natalie blinked at the sudden shift. I wasn't serious, I don't pretend. I told you that. He stood abruptly, movements sharp instead of graceful. I played a role once, centuries ago. Pretended to be human to court a woman I loved. She discovered the truth and looked at me with such horror, such revulsion. He cut himself off, jaw clenched. I swore I would never pretend to be anything but what I am. Not for love, not for politics, not for anything. Alaric, I didn't mean I should go. Dawn is close. He was already moving toward the door, putting distance between them. Natalie stood, heart pounding. I'm sorry. I wasn't asking you to pretend to be human. I would never, but he was gone, vanished with inhuman speed, leaving her alone in the archives with the scattered manuscripts and the sudden, aching certainty that she'd ruined something important. She didn't sleep that day. Just stared at her ceiling, replaying the conversation, hating herself for the thoughtless joke that had clearly reopened an old wound. The way his voice had fractured when he mentioned the woman who'd looked at him with horror that was centuries-old pain still fresh. Saturday arrived with grim inevitability. Natalie put on a dress her mother would approve of, steeled herself for the evening ahead, and drove to the family estate. The Anderson family home was exactly as oppressive as she remembered: sprawling grounds, ostentatious fountain, interior decorator magazine perfection that felt utterly soulless. Her parents greeted her at the door with searching looks. "Where's your young man?" her mother asked immediately. "There was a misunderstanding," Natalie started, but then Jessica appeared in the hallway, perfectly coiffed and already smirking. "Oh no, did he realize what he was getting into in bail?" her cousin asked with false sympathy. Natalie's father frowned. "Jessica mentioned he was a professional. Business consultant, was it?" "Jessica was mistaken about a lot of things," Natalie said tightly. Her mother's face fell into familiar, disappointed lines. "Natalie, sweetheart, you know you can tell us anything. If you're having trouble meeting people, I'm not having trouble. I'm focusing on my doctorate." "Education is important," her father said in that patronizing tone that made her want to scream. "But so is family, legacy. You're not getting any younger." "I'm 26. "Exactly," her mother said sadly. Natalie was about to snap something regrettable when the doorbell rang. Everyone looked confused. All the expected guests were already here. The butler answered the door, and Natalie's heart stopped. Alaric Draconis stood on the threshold, devastating in a midnight blue suit that made his pale hair and skin seem to glow. He looked like fallen royalty, dangerous and beautiful, and when his crimson eyes found hers across the foyer, they held something tentative, apologetic. "My apologies for the delay," he said smoothly, his accent placing him as European old money. Traffic was abysmal. He crossed the foyer in smooth strides and took Natalie's hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture so old-world and elegant her mother actually gasped. "Forgive me, beloved," he murmured, low enough only she could hear. "I was a coward. Let me do this for you. Let me prove I'm not pretending, not about what matters." Natalie's throat closed with emotion. "You came. I couldn't let you face them alone." His thumb traced her knuckles. "And I realized being your partner for the evening isn't pretending. Not when my feelings are genuine." Her heart kicked into overdrive, but her mother was already swooping in, all graciousness now that an impressive man had appeared. "You must be Natalie's friend. I'm Rebecca Anderson, and this is my husband, Thomas. Please come in. We're so delighted to finally meet you." Alaric released Natalie's hand, only placed his palm small of her back, possessive and protective. "The delight is mine. I'm Alaric Draconis. Natalie has told me much about you." "Draconis," her father repeated, recognition flickering. "The Draconis Holdings, the investment firm?" "Among other ventures, yes." Alaric's smile was polite but revealed nothing. Natalie's brain was still catching up. Alaric was here. The Vampire King was in her parents' house, about to have dinner with her family, and apparently he owned a massive investment firm she'd never thought to ask about. Jessica appeared, eyes widening as she took in Alaric's otherworldly beauty. Well, Natalie, you've been holding out on us." "Jessica," Natalie said coldly. "Thanks for the misunderstanding that led to all this." Her cousin had the grace to look slightly abashed, though she couldn't tear her eyes from Alaric. He, however, didn't spare her a glance. His attention remained fixed on Natalie, one hand still resting protectively at her back. They were ushered into the formal dining room, where Natalie's extended family waited. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them openly staring at Alaric. She couldn't blame them. He looked like he'd stepped out of a vampire romance novel, all pale elegance and coiled power, which, she supposed, he had the irony would have been funny if she wasn't so nervous. Alaric pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy, then settled beside her. Under the table his hand found hers, fingers interlacing, cool skin against warm. The touch steadied her. "So, Mr. Draconis," her father began once everyone was seated, "how did you and Natalie meet?" "The university archives," Alaric said smoothly. "I was reviewing some historical documents and Natalie was researching her thesis. We began discussing medieval trade routes, and I found her insights fascinating. I've always admired intelligent women." He said it like a fact, with such conviction that Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Her mother beamed. "Natalie's always been brilliant, though we worry she spends too much time with books and not enough with people." "I find people are often less interesting than books," Alaric replied. "Present company excluded, of course." But Natalie is that rare individual who makes reality more compelling than fiction. The way he said it, looking directly at her, it didn't sound like pretending. It sounded real. Servers brought out the first course. Natalie watched nervously as food was placed in front of Alaric. She'd never seen him eat, had no idea if he even could. Some vampire lore said they couldn't consume human food at all. But Alaric picked up his fork with perfect composure and took a small bite of the salad, chewing and swallowing without any sign of discomfort. At her surprised look, he leaned close and whispered, "Centuries of practice. It's not nourishing, but I can manage for appearances." The sacrifice inherent in that, forcing himself to consume food that meant nothing to him, just to maintain the facade for her sake, made Natalie's chest ache. "What do you do, Mr. Draconis?" one of her uncles asked. "Besides investments, I collect art, support various educational and cultural institutions. I have a particular interest in preserving history." His fingers tightened slightly on Natalie's. "The past holds lessons the present often forgets." "Sounds expensive," Jessica said with an edge of jealousy. "I'm fortunate to have resources," Alaric replied mildly. "Though I find the best things in life are rarely about money. True connection, intellectual stimulation, genuine respect, those are priceless." He was so smooth, so perfectly polished. Natalie watched her family eat it up, saw the approval in her father's eyes, the calculating interest in her mother's. Even Jessica seemed grudgingly impressed. But when Natalie looked at Alaric, she saw the tension in his jaw, the careful control in every movement. This was costing him not the food or the social performance, but the vulnerability of being here at all. The risk of pretending even though he'd sworn not to. Except he wasn't pretending about his feelings. He'd said so. The thought made her dizzy. "How serious are you two?" her mother asked with forced casualness as the main course arrived. "I only ask because we've been hoping Natalie might settle down soon. Give us grandchildren before we're too old to enjoy them." "Mom," Natalie hissed, mortified. But Alaric's expression had gone very still, very serious. "Mrs. Anderson, I realize we've only recently begun courting. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that Natalie is the most remarkable woman I've met in a very long time. If she'll have me, I intend to pursue this relationship as far as it will go." The declaration hung in the air. Natalie's family looked delighted. Natalie looked at Alaric and saw the truth in his blood-red eyes. He meant it, every word. "Alaric," she breathed. He raised her hand to his lips again, holding her gaze. "I told you, I don't pretend. Not about this." The dinner continued around them in a blur of satisfied family chatter, but Natalie barely tasted the food. Her entire focus was on the vampire king beside her, who was enduring human food and family interrogation because he cared about her. Because somewhere in those 5 nights of archive conversations, something real had formed between them. After dinner, her father insisted on showing Alaric the traditional interrogation space. Natalie tried to follow, but her mother pulled her aside into the parlor where the other women had gathered. "He's wonderful," Rebecca gushed immediately. "So refined, and clearly devoted to you, Natalie. How did you land him?" "I didn't land him, we just connected." Natalie was still reeling, barely present for the conversation. "He's definitely rich," Jessica said, though she sounded more envious than catty now. "And gorgeous." "Seriously, Nat, what does he see in you?" Natalie rounded on her cousin, temper finally snapping. "Maybe he sees someone who talks to him like a person instead of a prize. Maybe he values intelligence and genuine conversation. Maybe he's tired of people who only care about his money and looks." Jessica blinked, taken aback. "I think what Natalie means," her mother interjected smoothly, "is that they have a genuine connection. Which is wonderful, sweetheart. We're all very happy for you." In the study, Alaric stood by the window, looking out at the dark grounds while Thomas Anderson poured expensive scotch. "You seem very taken with my daughter," Thomas said, handing Alaric a glass. Alaric accepted it but didn't drink. "I am. She's brilliant, passionate about her work, and refreshingly honest. I find those qualities rare. You're aware she's focused on her education? She won't give up her doctorate for anyone. I would never ask her to." Alaric met the older man's eyes steadily. "I support her ambitions completely. In fact, I've been helping with her research. It's her mind I find most attractive." Thomas studied him carefully. "You're not like the men she usually dates." "I hope not. I have no interest in wasting her time with games or half measures." Alaric set down the untouched scotch. "Mr. Anderson, I understand your concern. Natalie is precious and you want to protect her. But I assure you, my intentions are entirely honorable." As honorable as a vampire's can be, he thought but didn't say. "See that they remain so," Thomas said, but his tone was approving. "She's been hurt before. I won't see it happen again. Neither will I." When Alaric and Natalie were finally allowed to leave after another round of effusive goodbyes from her mother, and pointed looks from Jessica. Natalie practically collapsed against him the moment they reached his car, a black luxury sedan that probably cost more than her apartment building. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm so sorry. I never should have joked about it, and I definitely didn't expect you to actually come." And Alaric cupped her face gently, tilting her chin up until she met his eyes. "I'm the one who should apologize. You made an offhand comment, and I reacted poorly. Brought up old pain that had nothing to do with you. You said you swore never to pretend again. I did. But tonight I realized something." His thumb traced her cheekbone with infinite care. "When I'm with you, I'm not pretending. Yes, I concealed what I am from your family. But my feelings? The things I said about you? Those were entirely real." Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. "Alaric, we've known each other less than a week. I've lived 800 years, Natalie. I know the difference between passing interest and genuine connection." He leaned closer until she could feel the coolness radiating from his skin. "You saw me, truly saw what I am, and didn't run. You spoke to me like an equal, challenged my assumptions, made me feel less alone than I have in centuries. That's not something I take lightly. I'm human," she whispered. "Mortal. I'll age and die while you stay frozen in time. I'm aware." Pain flickered across his perfect features. "Believe me, I've considered every reason why this is impossible. But impossibility has never stopped me before." He was going to kiss her. Natalie could see it in the way his gaze dropped to her lips, in the careful way he held himself back, waiting for permission. She gave it by closing the distance herself, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was cool and soft and perfect. Alaric made a low sound and pulled her closer, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. For a moment that stretched and crystallized, there was nothing but them, human and vampire, mortal and eternal, finding something impossible and precious in each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, while Natalie was breathing. Alaric was just doing an excellent imitation. He rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said softly. "Let me show you my world, all of it. No more secrets." Natalie should have been terrified. Should have said no. Should have run back to her safe, boring, normal life. Instead, she said, yes. Alaric's residence turned out to be a massive estate on the outskirts of the city, all Gothic architecture and sprawling grounds, hidden behind walls and gates that looked decorative but were clearly reinforced. The house itself was a masterpiece of dark stone and soaring windows, every one of them covered with UV-resistant glass. "Welcome to Draconis Manor," Alaric said as he led her inside. "It's been my primary residence for the last century." The interior was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, antique furniture that was actually antique because Alaric had purchased it new, priceless artwork covering the walls. But despite the opulence, it felt lived in. Books scattered on tables, a laptop open in the study, small personal touches that made it a home rather than a museum. "I have staff," Alaric explained, "but I gave them the weekend off. I wanted privacy for this conversation." "This conversation," Natalie repeated, nervous butterflies erupting in her stomach. He guided her to a sitting room dominated by a massive fireplace, flames already crackling. They settled on a velvet couch and Alaric took her hands in his. "I need to tell you everything," he said quietly. "About what I am, what my world is like, what being with me would mean, and then you need to decide if you can accept it." Natalie nodded, throat tight. Alaric began to speak. He told her about his turning, 800 years ago, a young nobleman, dying of plague, offered immortality by a vampire who saw potential in him. He told her about the centuries of learning to control the bloodlust, the hunger that defined early vampirism, about rising through vampire society until he claimed the throne of the Eastern Territories through a combination of political savvy and sheer power. "We have laws," he explained. "Strict ones. Vampires cannot kill humans for blood. We have arrangements with blood banks, willing donors, medical facilities. Those who break the laws face swift punishment." "How swift?" "Execution, usually. I don't tolerate predators." His eyes glinted red. "We fought too hard for peaceful coexistence to let rogue vampires destroy it." He told her about vampire politics, the different territories, the uneasy alliances, the old families who still clung to ancient prejudices, about the subsect of vampires who wanted to reveal themselves to humanity and those who insisted on continued secrecy. "I've spent centuries building stability," Alaric said, "creating systems that allow my kind to exist without harming yours. It's not perfect, but it's better than the bloodshed of the past. Why are you telling me this? Because if you're with me, you'll be drawn into that world. You'll be seen as my weakness, my vulnerability. Other vampires will use you to get to me. Humans who discover what I am might see you as a traitor or a thrall." He gripped her hands tighter. "I can protect you, I will protect you, but it won't be easy. Your life will never be normal again." Natalie absorbed this, heart pounding. What about the woman you mentioned? The one you pretended for? Alaric's expression shuddered. Her name was Isabel. I met her in 1743 in Paris. I was young still by vampire standards, reckless. I fell in love with her and convinced myself I could live as human. I ate food until I was ill, forced myself to mimic human sleep patterns, never let her see my true nature. For 2 years I maintained the charade. What happened? She discovered me feeding one night. I'd been starving myself to maintain the pretense, and I finally broke. The look on her face when she saw what I truly was. His voice cracked horror, revulsion, betrayal. She screamed that I was a monster, a demon. Tried to stake me while I slept. Alaric, I didn't harm her. I left, erased myself from her life, and swore I would never again pretend to be something I'm not. If someone couldn't accept me as a vampire, as a creature of blood and night, then they couldn't truly love me. Natalie understood now, the depth of that wound, the way it had shaped him for centuries. I'm not Isabel, she said firmly. I knew what you were from the first moment, and I didn't run. I won't run now. You say that, but you haven't seen everything yet. Alaric stood, pacing with inhuman grace. You haven't seen me feed, haven't witnessed the council meetings where ancient vampires argue politics in languages dead for millennia. Haven't felt the weight of what it means to be claimed by the Vampire King, then show me. Natalie rose, meeting his pacing with stubborn determination. Stop trying to scare me away and show me your world, all of it. He stared at her, something like hope and fear warring in his expression. You're certain? I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm also more alive than I've been in years. You make me feel like the world is bigger and stranger and more magical than I ever imagined. I'm not walking away from that. Alaric crossed to her in one fluid movement, cupping her face with both hands. You are extraordinary, brave and stubborn and absolutely maddening. I've been called worse. She smiled up at him. Show me, Alaric. I want to understand your world. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Natalie felt the press of his fangs against her lower lip, not breaking skin, just present, a reminder of what he was. Instead of pulling away, she pressed closer, and his control fractured with a groan. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were pure crimson, fangs fully descended. He looked inhuman and dangerous and utterly beautiful. Not frightened, he asked roughly. Not of you. She reached up to trace the line of his jaw, feeling him tremble under her touch. Never of you. Over the next week, Alaric kept his promise. He showed Natalie everything. She met other vampires, his inner circle of advisors and guards. They were all striking in that same pale, regal way, with eyes ranging from dark red to almost pink, depending on how recently they'd fed. They treated her with cautious respect, clearly unsure what to make of the human woman their king had brought into their world. She's not a pet, Alaric told them coldly when one advisor suggested Natalie wait outside during a council meeting. She's my partner, she stays. Natalie sat through 3 hours of vampire politics, watching Alaric command the room with effortless authority. He was magnificent like this every inch, the ancient king, wielding power with precision and intelligence. When a younger vampire challenged his decision on territory borders, Alaric shut him down with a single look that promised consequences. You were incredible, Natalie told him afterward. I was doing my job. But he looked pleased, pulling her close. What did you think of the council? That vampire politics make epic politics look simple. Also, Lord Constantine definitely hates me. Constantine is a traditionalist who thinks humans are beneath us. Ignore him. Hard to ignore someone actively glaring at me for 3 hours. Alaric's expression darkened. If he bothers you, tell me. I'll handle it. The protectiveness in his voice sent warmth through her chest. I can handle some glares. He also showed her how he fed. They visited one of the blood banks he'd mentioned, a discreet medical facility where willing donors provided blood in exchange for generous compensation. Natalie watched him drink from a sterile bag, efficient and clinical. It's not the same as feeding from a living source, he admitted. The blood is colder, less vibrant, but it's ethical. Which matters more? Have you ever wanted to feed from me? Alaric went very still. Yes, he said honestly. Your blood calls to me, Natalie. It's part of why I noticed you that first night. But I would never take without permission, and I won't ask. The power imbalance is too great. She appreciated his honesty, even as the knowledge sent a confusing thrill through her. He showed her the Vampire Archives, a library that made the university collection look like a children's section. Thousands of years of history, preserved in texts and artifacts. Natalie spent hours there, cross-referencing her thesis research, finding answers to questions she'd never thought to ask. This is incredible, she breathed, holding a manuscript from the 10th century. Do you know what this is worth? What it could teach us? That's why I preserve it. Alaric leaned against a shelf, watching her with soft eyes. History deserves to be remembered, even the dark parts. He showed her the training rooms where vampire guards practiced combat with weapons in bare hands, moving too fast for human eyes to track. Showed her the sun-resistant glass technology they'd helped develop, the medical research they funded, the charitable organizations they ran from the shadows. We take from humanity by our nature, Alaric explained. The least we can do is give back in other ways. And through it all, Natalie fell deeper in love with him. With his complexity, his honor, his fierce protection of those he considered his. The way he commanded ancient vampires with effortless authority, but treated her with careful respect. The way he'd built something stable and good out of centuries of darkness. They grew closer with each passing day. Stolen kisses in the archives. Long conversations by the fireplace, Alaric teaching her vampire history while she explained modern political theory. The careful dance of learning each other, building trust and intimacy across the vast gulf of their differences. 2 weeks after the family dinner, Natalie's mother called again. "Darling, we simply loved Alaric. You must bring him to the holiday party next month. The whole family is asking about him." Natalie glanced at Alaric, who was reading beside her on the couch. He looked up, one eyebrow raised in silent question. "We'll be there, Mom," Natalie said, feeling giddy at the certainty. At the fact that there was a "we" now. Wonderful. Oh, and Jessica wanted to apologize for the confusion. She admits she may have exaggerated a bit. "May have," Natalie said dryly. When she hung up, Alaric pulled her into his lap. "Another family dinner? Am I to endure more human food and interrogation?" "Afraid so. Think you can handle it?" "For you?" He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Anything." But their peace was shattered 3 days later when Lord Constantine made his move. Natalie was leaving the university library late, still maintaining her human life and thesis work, when a car pulled up beside her. Before she could react, someone grabbed her from behind and a cloth pressed over her mouth. Chemical sweetness. Chloroform. She fought, but human strength meant nothing against vampire speed. The world went dark. Natalie woke in a stone chamber lit by torches. Old-fashioned torches, like something from a medieval dungeon. Her head pounded and her mouth tasted like chemicals. Ah, the pet awakens. Lord Constantine stepped into view, all pale elegance and cruel amusement. 2 other vampires flanked him, both unfamiliar. "What do you want?" Natalie's voice came out hoarse, to remind our king of his priorities. "He's become distracted by you, human. Weakened by sentiment. The council has noticed. So you kidnapped me? That seems counterproductive if you're trying to prove he's not attached." Constantine smiled, showing fangs. "On the contrary, when he comes for you, and he we'll be ready. An ambush. With the king eliminated, the council can choose new leadership. Someone less progressive." Horror flooded through her. This wasn't about her at all. She was bait for a coup. "Alaric will destroy you," she said with more confidence than she felt. "Perhaps, but we have advantages he doesn't expect. Technology allies, and the element of surprise." Constantine leaned close, inhaling. "Plus, your blood really does smell exquisite. If we're lucky, you might survive long enough to witness your lover's death before we drain you." Natalie's mind raced. She needed to warn Alaric somehow. The doors exploded inward with a concussive blast that shook the stones. Alaric stood in the smoking entrance. His eyes pure crimson fire, fangs bared in a snarl that promised death. He looked like every nightmare vampire story, beautiful and terrible, radiating lethal power. "You touched what is mine," he said, voice dropping to a register that vibrated in Natalie's bones. "You threatened my beloved. There is no mercy for this." Constantine's allies moved to attack, but Alaric was already in motion. Vampire speed made the fight almost impossible to follow. Blurs of movement, the crack of breaking bones, screams cut short. Within seconds, both attackers lay broken on the ground. Constantine backed away, hands raised. "My lord, please, this was a misunderstanding." "No." Alaric advanced on him, death incarnate. "This was treason. This was you threatening the woman I love. This was your last mistake." He moved so fast Natalie barely saw it. One moment Constantine was pleading, the next Alaric had torn out his throat. The older vampire collapsed, and Alaric watched dispassionately as he bled out. Vampires being difficult to kill but not impossible. Then Alaric was at Natalie's side, breaking her restraints, gathering her into his arms. "Did they hurt you? Feed from you?" "No, I'm okay." "Alaric, they were planning an ambush. I know. I traced you through the blood connection we share from proximity. Found this place, dealt with the guards outside." His hand shook as he cupped her face, checking for injuries. "When I realized you were taken, Natalie, I've never been so terrified. You saved me. I will always save you, always protect you. You are mine and I am yours, and anyone who threatens that will face my wrath." He pulled her against his chest and she felt his whole body trembling. "I cannot lose you. I won't." Natalie held him tight, feeling the desperate strength in his embrace. "You won't. I'm right here." Other vampires appeared, Alaric's loyal guards, drawn by the commotion. They took in the scene with grim understanding, efficiently removing the bodies while Alaric continued to hold Natalie, like she might vanish. "My lord," one of them said carefully, "the council should be informed." "Summon them," Alaric commanded without releasing Natalie. "Full session, tonight. There are going to be some changes." The council meeting was tense, held in a grand chamber beneath the city streets, the vampire court in all its Gothic glory. Dozens of ancient vampires filled ornate chairs, all of them whispering about Constantine's death and the human woman standing at their king's side. Alaric had refused to let Natalie leave his sight. She stood beside his throne, his hand wrapped possessively around hers, making a statement to everyone present. "Lord Constantine committed treason," Alaric announced, his voice ringing through the chamber. "He kidnapped the woman under my protection, planned my assassination, and attempted to orchestrate a coup. His co-conspirators have been similarly dealt with. Does anyone wish to question my actions?" Silence. No one was that foolish. "Furthermore," Alaric continued, "I am making a decree. Natalie Anderson is under my official protection. She is my consort, my beloved, and any who threaten her threaten me directly. She has full access to our world, our archives, our resources. This is not negotiable." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, shock, confusion, some anger. An elderly vampire in the front row stood. "My lord, with respect, a human consort is unprecedented. The security risks alone are mine to manage." Alaric cut him off. "I have ruled these territories for 8 centuries. I have maintained peace, prosperity, and order. I have earned the right to choose my own companion without council interference, but the laws of succession will be addressed if and when necessary. Natalie is mortal. I'm aware of the complications. But she is mine, and this is final." His tone brooked no argument. The council wisely offered none. After the meeting, Alaric took Natalie back to the manor. The moment they were alone, his composure cracked. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When I realized Constantine had taken you, centuries of control meant nothing. I would have burned the world to find you." "I know." Natalie held him tight, feeling the desperate love in his trembling. "I'm okay. We're okay. You could have died because of me, because of what you mean to me. Alaric, look at me." She pulled back until she could meet his eyes. "I chose this. I chose you, knowing the risks, and I'd choose you again, every time." "I love you," he said, the words raw and honest. "I have loved you since that first night in the archives when you looked at me without fear. I love your brilliant mind, your stubborn courage, your passionate heart. I love you so much it terrifies me." Tears pricked Natalie's eyes. "I love you too, my vampire king. My impossible, wonderful man." She kissed him, and he responded with desperate intensity. The kiss deepened, turned heated, and Natalie gasped as his fangs scraped her lip carefully, never breaking skin without permission. "Alaric," she breathed against his mouth. "Tell me what you want," he said roughly. "Anything, everything, it's yours. I want you, all of you." He carried her to his bedroom, a massive space dominated by a 4-poster bed with blackout curtains. Laid her down on silk sheets with reverent care. Made love to her with 8 centuries of skill and desperate tenderness, worshipping every inch of her skin while murmuring endearments in languages long dead. Afterward they lay tangled together, Natalie's head on his chest even though no heartbeat sounded beneath. "I need to tell you something," Alaric said quietly. "About us, about the future." Natalie tensed. "Okay, you're mortal, I'm not. That means eventually you'll age while I stay frozen." His arms tightened around her. "I've been researching options. There are ways to extend human life, medical treatments, genetic therapies. Nothing that would make you vampire, but enough to give us more time. Decades, possibly a century if the research pans out. You've been researching how to keep me alive longer?" "Of course." He said it like it was obvious. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in 800 years. I want as much time with you as possible." Natalie's heart melted. "What about turning me? Making me vampire?" Alaric went very still. "Is that something you want? I don't know, maybe? Eventually?" She traced patterns on his chest. "I'm not ready to die and leave you alone for the rest of eternity. But I'm also not ready to give up sunlight and regular food forever. Is there a middle ground?" "There might be. Vampire turning is a complex process. It's possible to delay it, keep you human for decades while you age naturally, then turn you before mortality claims you. If that's what you choose." He tilted her chin up, eyes serious. "But that's a decision for later. Years from now. For now, I just want to love you and be with you and figure out this impossible thing we've created together." "That sounds perfect." They talked through the night about practical things like where she'd live. Moving into the manor seemed inevitable. How to handle her family, carefully, with continued discretion. What her thesis defense would look like. with access to the vampire archives. It would be groundbreaking. Your parents will expect us to marry eventually, Alaric said with dry amusement. Humans are very particular about these things. Are you proposing? Natalie teased. Not yet. When I do, it will be spectacular. I've had 800 years to develop a sense of romance. He kissed her forehead. But yes, eventually, if you'll have an ancient vampire as a husband, I think I can manage that. The months that followed were a careful balancing act. Natalie completed her thesis to rave reviews, thanks to the unprecedented primary sources she'd accessed. She never revealed where she got them, just cited anonymous archives and private collections. Her defense was brilliant, and she graduated with the highest honors. Alaric attended the ceremony, sitting in the back in dark glasses and a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the daylight streaming through the windows. It clearly pained him, but he endured it to watch her accept her doctorate. I'm so proud of you, he told her afterward, spinning her around in a hug that lifted her off the ground. She moved into Draconis Manor officially, turning one of the countless rooms into a study for her postdoctoral research. Alaric's staff, a mix of loyal vampires and well-paid humans who'd signed extensive NDAs, treated her with warm respect once they realized their master's attachment was genuine. She attended vampire council meetings, learning the intricate politics that governed their world, became an unexpected mediator between progressive and traditional factions, her outsider perspective offering solutions neither side had considered. You're better at this than I am, Alaric told her after she'd negotiated a tricky treaty dispute. Perhaps I should make you co-regent. Let's not get crazy. I'm still figuring out which ancient vampire hates me for which reason. She also maintained her human life. Coffee dates with old friends, family dinners where Alaric continued to charm her parents, teaching opportunities at the university. The dual existence was exhausting but fulfilling proof that she could have both worlds. Her family adored Alaric. At the holiday party, her mother pulled Natalie aside with shining eyes. He's perfect for you, sweetheart. I've never seen you so happy. I am happy, Natalie agreed. Really, genuinely happy. Even Jessica grudgingly approved, though she still looked at Alaric like she couldn't quite believe he was real. The only shadow was the knowledge that someday, Natalie would have to make the choice: mortality or transformation. It loomed in the distance, years away but inevitable. For now, though, she pushed the worry aside and focused on the present, on the vampire king who loved her with fierce devotion, on the impossible life they were building together. A year after that first meeting in the archives, Alaric took Natalie to Paris. The city of lights, romance, and his most painful memory. They stood on a balcony overlooking the Seine, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. Alaric was tense, old ghosts clearly haunting him. I haven't been back here since Isabel, he said quietly. The city holds too many memories. Then let's make new ones. Natalie took his hand. Better ones. He pulled her close and they swayed to music drifting up from a cafe below. I was terrified to bring you here, afraid the past would poison the present. The past made you who you are. I wouldn't change that. She looked up at him, at the face she loved so dearly. You're not that young vampire anymore, desperate to be human. You're the vampire king. You're my partner. You've spent centuries becoming someone incredible. Because of you, he cupped her face with infinite tenderness. You gave me hope that I could be loved as I am. Monster and man, vampire and king, all the contradictions that make me whole. You're not a monster, you're the best man I've ever known. He kissed her there on the Paris balcony while the city sparkled below and the night wrapped around them like a promise. When he pulled back, he was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. Marry me, he said, not someday in the vague future, but soon. Be my wife, my queen, my everything. Let me spend whatever time we have showing you how much I love you. Natalie's heart soared. Yes, absolutely yes. He produced a ring from his pocket, an antique piece, with a blood-red ruby surrounded by diamonds, beautiful and unusual. This belonged to my mother. It's been in my family for 900 years. I want you to have it. She let him slide it onto her finger, tears streaming down her face. It's perfect. You're perfect. This is all perfect. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. The wedding took place at dusk in the gardens of Draconis Manor, with Natalie's family on one side and vampire nobility on the other. Her father walked her down the aisle, clearly awed by the Gothic splendor surrounding them. Alaric waited at the altar in a black suit that made him look like a prince from a dark fairy tale, his crimson eyes glowing with love as she approached. The ceremony was conducted by a vampire elder who'd been a priest in his human life centuries ago. He spoke of eternal bonds, of love that transcended mortality, of the courage required to bridge two worlds. Do you, Alaric Draconis, take this woman as your wife? The elder intoned. I do, Alaric said, his voice steady and sure. for all the days she'll give me and every night beyond. And do you, Natalie Anderson, take this vampire as your husband? I do, Natalie said through happy tears. For as long as we both shall live. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Alaric promised to love her fiercely, protect her always, and never take a single moment with her for granted. Natalie promised to stand beside him through political storms and vampire drama, to challenge him when needed, and to love every part of him, fangs and all. When they kissed, the assembled crowd, human and vampire alike, erupted in applause. The reception was magnificent. A feast for the humans, blood wine for the vampires, dancing that went on until dawn threatened. Natalie's mother cried happily. Her father gave a toast about finding someone who loves you completely. Even Jessica seemed genuinely moved, hugging Natalie and whispering, "You really did land a prince." As the sky began to lighten, Alaric swept Natalie into his arms. "Time to go, beloved, before I become a very crispy groom." He carried her inside to their private chambers, where blackout curtains ensured complete darkness. Set her down on their bed, now officially their marriage bed, and looked at her with such adoration it stole her breath. "My wife," he said wonderingly. "My Natalie, my queen, my husband," she replied, pulling him down to her. "My vampire king, my Alaric." They made love as husband and wife, the bond between them somehow even stronger, more sacred. Afterward, Natalie lay in his arms and thought about the impossible journey that had brought her here. One joke about needing a fake boyfriend. One vampire who'd sworn never to pretend again. One choice to show up anyway, to risk vulnerability one more time. And it had led to this. To love and partnership and a future neither of them could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Alaric murmured against her hair. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive. That I love you more than I thought possible." She twisted to look at him. "That I want forever with you, however we make that work." His eyes glowed crimson in the darkness. "Forever is a long time. Good thing I really like you then." He laughed and pulled her closer. "I've been researching the life extension treatments more seriously. There's a facility in Switzerland making incredible progress. If you're willing to undergo the procedures, we could have 70, maybe 80 years together before we need to consider turning. 80 years of this." Natalie gestured at the luxury surrounding them, at the vampire king holding her. "I think I can handle that. And after? When your body begins to fail despite the treatments. Will you let me turn you then? Let me make you immortal so I don't have to lose you." It was the question they'd been dancing around for months. Natalie took a breath, then nodded. "Yes. When the time comes, turn me. I don't want to leave you alone for eternity. And honestly, the idea of forever with you sounds pretty amazing." Relief flooded his expression. "You're certain? Vampirism is irreversible. You'd be giving up sunlight, human food, aging. I'd be gaining eternity with the man I love. That seems like a fair trade." She traced his jaw, feeling the cool perfection of his skin. "Besides, someone needs to keep the vampire king from getting too brooding and dramatic." "I am not dramatic. You literally tore a vampire's throat out for kidnapping me. That was justice, not drama. You once told me you'd burn the world to find me, a simple statement of fact." Natalie grinned. "Whatever you say, darling." He kissed her to shut her up, and she let him, melting into his embrace. This was her life now. Vampire politics and ancient libraries. Council meetings and family dinners. A husband who'd lived for centuries but looked at her like she was his whole world. It was strange and impossible and perfect. 5 years later, Natalie stood in front of her graduate seminar, teaching a course on vampire influence in medieval history. The students had no idea how much of her information came from primary sources from her husband and his archives, but the class was wildly popular. She'd published 2 groundbreaking books on vampire-human interaction throughout history, carefully written to seem like theoretical analysis rather than documented fact. The academic world hailed her as revolutionary, and several universities had tried to poach her. She stayed at her current institution. Alaric owned it, after all. At night she ruled beside him as queen of the vampire territories. The council had finally accepted her, respect earned through years of fair mediation and genuine care for vampire welfare. She'd helped modernize many of their ancient practices, bringing fresh perspective to problems that had festered for centuries. "The human queen," they called her, said with warmth now, not mockery. She still attended family dinners, though she'd had to carefully explain why she and Alaric didn't have children yet. "We're focused on our careers," she told her mother, which was true enough. The full truth that pregnancy became exponentially more complicated with the life extension treatments, and they'd decided to wait until after her eventual turning was too complex to explain. Her parents didn't push. They were simply happy she was happy. Jessica had eventually married a perfectly normal accountant and stopped causing drama. At the last family gathering, she'd pulled Natalie aside with unusual sincerity. "I used to be so jealous of you," she admitted. "You had this incredible man, this fairy tale life, but watching you guys together, it's not magic. It's work and partnership and genuine love. You earned it." Natalie hugged her, surprised and touched. "Thanks, Jess." In the quiet moments late at night when the vampire world slept and the human world hadn't yet woken, Natalie and Alaric would curl up together and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes he'd tell stories from his long life. Sometimes she'd share her research discoveries. Sometimes they'd just exist together in comfortable silence, the kind only possible between two people who knew each other completely. "Do you ever regret it?" Alaric asked one such night. "Choosing this complicated life?" "Never," Natalie said without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made. Even knowing what's coming, the transformation, the immortality." She turned to face him fully. "Alaric, I get to spend forever with you. I get to learn and grow and exist in this incredible world you've built. Why would I regret that? Because you'll lose the sunlight, the simple human pleasures. I'll gain other things and we'll face it together." She kissed him softly. "Stop worrying. I chose you. I keep choosing you. That's not going to change." He held her close and she felt his careful control, the love he channeled into every touch. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she teased. "But you're stuck with me anyway." 20 years into their marriage, when Natalie was 46 and the life extension treatments were beginning to show their limits, they had the conversation they'd both known was coming. "It's time," Natalie said quietly, studying her reflection. She still looked young, late 20s at most, thanks to the treatments, but she could feel her body beginning to fail in small ways. Fatigue that sleep didn't cure. Aches that shouldn't exist in someone who looked so young. Alaric came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you certain? We could continue the treatments a while longer and delay the inevitable?" "No." She turned in his embrace. "I'm ready. I want this. I want forever with you." His eyes glowed crimson with emotion. "The transformation is painful, agonizing. I'll hate every moment of knowing you're in pain. Then you'll hold me through it and we'll get to the other side together." She cupped his face. "I trust you, completely." They prepared carefully. Alaric consulted with the oldest vampires in his territories, ensuring he knew every detail of a successful turning. They chose a date, set up the transformation chamber in the depths of the manor, and Natalie said temporary goodbyes to her human life. Her parents were aging now, her father nearly 70. She visited them one last time, memorizing their faces. "You look so young still," her mother said with wonder and a hint of sadness. "Those treatments Alaric arranged must be incredible." "They are," Natalie said, which was true. "I'm lucky to have him. We're lucky you found each other." Her father hugged her tight. "You're happy, sweetheart. That's all we ever wanted." If they suspected the truth that their daughter was about to become something other than human, they didn't say. Natalie thought they might know on some level. But they loved her enough to let her make her own choices. The night of the transformation, Natalie wasn't afraid. She lay on the prepared bed in the chamber, Alaric beside her, and smiled up at him. "Ready?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. "Ready." He bit her wrist first, a precise puncture that sent venom flooding into her bloodstream. Then her throat, her thigh, ensuring the transformation would be complete and swift. As the venom spread, Natalie felt the burning begin. It was agony. Fire in her veins, her body dying and remaking itself simultaneously. She screamed, couldn't help it, and through it all Alaric held her, whispering endearments and apologies and promises. "I'm here, beloved. I won't leave you. You're so strong, so brave. It will pass, I swear. Just hold on." The pain lasted 3 days. 3 days of burning, of feeling her human life die cell by cell. 3 days of Alaric never leaving her side, holding her through the worst of it. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Natalie opened her eyes to a world transformed. Colors were sharper, sounds clearer. She could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls, smell the different types of blood in the guards stationed outside the door. Her body felt powerful, graceful, completely changed. She looked at her hands and saw pale skin, nearly translucent, touched her hair and found it had lightened to silver white. Alaric's voice was tentative, hopeful, terrified. She turned to him and knew her eyes must be crimson now, must look as inhuman as his. "Hey, husband." Relief broke across his face. "Hey, wife. How do you feel?" "Hungry," she admitted. "And strong." And she moved, and suddenly she was across the room, vampire speed responding to her thought. "Wow, that's going to take getting used to." Alaric laughed, the sound bordering on giddy. "You're beautiful. You were always beautiful, but now you're magnificent." He was right. She could see herself in the mirror, pale and regal and dangerous. A vampire queen in truth now, not just in title. "Feed first," Alaric said, guiding her with gentle hands. "Then we'll work on control." You'll be unstable for a few weeks while your body adjusts. He taught her everything. How to feed without killing, how to control the bloodlust, how to move with her new speed and strength, how to exist in a world that suddenly made sense in ways it never had before. Her senses were overwhelming at first, too much input, too much stimulation. But Alaric helped her filter it, focus it. Within a month she had basic control. Within 6 months, she was adapting beautifully. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the sun. Standing at the window at dawn, watching the light she could no longer touch without burning. Alaric stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. "I'm sorry, don't be, it was my choice." She leaned back against him. "Besides, I've got eternity to experience all the nighttime wonders instead. And you, I've got you forever now." "Forever," he agreed, kissing her temple. "My queen, my beloved, my eternal partner." Natalie's parents passed away peacefully 5 years after her transformation. She attended both funerals, hiding her pale skin and red eyes behind heavy makeup and colored contacts, grieving the loss of the people who'd raised her. "They loved you so much," Alaric told her as she cried in his arms afterward, "and they died knowing you were happy. That's a gift. I know. I just wish," she couldn't finish the thought. Wished she could have had more time. Wished they could have known the full truth. Wished immortality didn't mean watching mortals die. "I know," Alaric said softly, holding her through the grief. Jessica was the only family member who seemed to suspect the truth. At the reading of their parents' will, she'd stared at Natalie for a long moment. "You haven't aged a day in 25 years, she said quietly. "Neither has Alaric." "Good genetics," Natalie replied lightly. "Right, genetics." Jessica smiled sadly. "Whatever it is, whatever you've become, I hope you're happy, Nat. I hope it's worth it." "It is," Natalie said honestly. "More than you could imagine." They hugged, and Natalie wondered if this would be the last time she saw her cousin. Jessica was mortal, aging normally. Eventually, Natalie would have to fade from her life entirely to avoid difficult questions. The price of immortality. One she'd accepted, but that didn't make it easy. 50 years after their marriage, 100 years after that first meeting in the archives, Natalie stood beside Alaric in the Vampire Council chamber as they celebrated a century of peace in the Eastern Territories. She was fully vampire now, had been for decades. Her transformation was considered one of the most successful in modern vampire history. She'd retained her humanity, her compassion, her brilliant mind, while gaining all the benefits of vampirism. Together, she and Alaric had revolutionized vampire-human relations. They'd established better blood-sharing programs, funded medical research that benefited both species, created cultural exchange programs that let humans glimpse vampire history without revealing the full truth. Their territories thrived. Both vampires and humans prospered under their careful rule. "Speech," someone called from the assembled vampires. Alaric looked at Natalie, silently asking. She nodded, and they stood together before their people. "A century ago," Alaric began, "I was alone, powerful, successful, but fundamentally isolated. I'd convinced myself that was my fate, that a monster couldn't have true partnership. Then I walked into some archives to research my thesis," Natalie continued with a smile, "and found a beautiful vampire who looked at me like I was dangerous. Which was fair, because I was armed with caffeine and academic spite." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "She changed everything," Alaric said, looking at her with undimmed adoration. "She saw me, truly saw me, and didn't run. She challenged me, frustrated me, made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He showed me a world I'd never imagined," Natalie added. "Gave me forever and his heart and a partnership that makes every day an adventure. Even the boring council meetings." More laughter. "To the next century," Alaric raised a glass of blood wine, "and all the centuries beyond." "Together, together," Natalie echoed. The crowd cheered, and in that moment, surrounded by their people, Natalie felt the absolute rightness of her choices. Every step that had led her here, every risk she'd taken. Later, alone in their chi, Alaric pulled her into his arms. "Happy anniversary, beloved. Happy century, husband." She kissed him deeply, still thrilling at the touch even after all these years. "Here's to the next one, and the one after that, and every one that follows." His eyes glowed crimson with love and promise. "Forever, my Natalie, forever, my Alaric." Outside, the night stretched on, eternal and beautiful, full of possibility. They had time now, all the time in the world. Time to love and learn and grow together. Time to build something lasting. Natalie thought back to that desperate, stressed graduate student who'd joked about needing a fake boyfriend for one dinner. Thought about the vampire king who'd sworn never to pretend again, but who'd shown up anyway because he couldn't bear to let her face it alone. One dinner had turned into a lifetime. A lifetime had turned into eternity, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it. The end was really just another beginning, another chapter in an endless story. And Natalie was exactly where she wanted to be, in the arms of the vampire who'd taught her that forever wasn't something to fear. It was something to celebrate. With him she had forever. And forever, she knew with absolute certainty, would never be long enough.